So welcome to this week's episode of the Clare Business Chamber podcast, brought to you by Ennis Chamber of Commerce. I'm your host, Joe Whelan. On this instalment of the Clare Business Chamber podcast, I'm delighted to sit down with Joe Whelan, Senior of Whelan Farm Machinery in Kilrush, in Galway, in Ennis, in Granagh and Limerick, among other places, to speak about his life in business, his life growing up in Shra, in West Clare, and his overall experience of the world. He has a rich vein of experience over the years. We're delighted to be filming the podcast in the
Museum of Irish Rural Life.
In the Museum of Irish Rural Life. So, Joe, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us. I think the very fact that you've allowed us to film here in your Museum of Irish Rural Life, it's almost emblematic of your own life and your experience, and even the timeline of the Whelan family. The Whelan family are obviously very well known in Clare, but you have had a fascinating upbringing that a lot of people who may even deal with you and do business with you mightn't realise where you came from, and the interest in upbringing, and I think just the worldly view you had growing up. Like, you grew up in Shra, Joe, and...
Yeah, I grew up in Shra. I was born in 1943 to a family of 7. I was, you might call me a war baby, because we had basically the middle of the war. And so while things would be scarce and food would be scarce, we farmed independently. We were self-sufficient and everything. My father and mother were both American citizens. They went to America when they were very young, 17 and 18. My father went to Canada because we were under British rule, and he travelled with another gentleman from Monmore. And when they got off the boat in Canada, they found it difficult to get employment, because everywhere they went, they were told no blacks or Irish need to apply for a job. But my father was competent on Model T cars. He had a great interest in mechanization and read books, but he also served his time in Kilkee with Hines and Crowley, who sold cars. And he eventually got a job with an Englishman, and the agreement was a third for me, a third for you, and a third for the business. So he basically got a third of his wages every week. The man he worked for was a very nice man with no family, and they got on very well together. The problem was that the other man was unskilled, so my father couldn't sustain him. So they decided to go to Niagara Falls, and they boarded a coal train, and they paid someone some few dollars to cover themselves up with coal, and to go to the American side. So they were told when they were going under the lights to keep their eyes closed, because the authorities were looking straight down, and if your eyes were open, they were obviously looking for people crossing the border. So they got to the other side anyway, and they walked along a beach or whatever, and a young fellow ran up and he said, "My mother keeps boarders." So they had enough money to stay with this woman for a week until they cleaned up and tidied themselves up. But when they left the boarding house, they got caught by the authorities, and they had to go to night school in America and learn the history of America. So history in our house was an important issue. We were all taught to learn our history. My mother, on the other hand, she was from East Clare, where my father was from West Clare. So she had worked for a solicitor in Dublin before she decided to go to America, and she got a very good recommendation. So she ended up working for a director of the Goodyear Company, and she was an extremely hard worker. So they got on well until the Wall Street crash came, and basically people lost what they had. My father had a good job. He was involved with the Ford Motor Company, and my mother also had a good job. But when the Wall Street crash came in 1929, everybody was on the bottom rung of the ladder. So they survived away, and they came back to Ireland. My father inherited the family farm, and they came back in the mid-30s. And there were difficult times. They had their cows and cattle sort of re-established and the farm re-established. And the next thing that happened was we had the economic war. So suddenly your animals were worth very little, and you had to cut the tongue off the calf when it was born and take it into the local barrack and collect 10 shillings for it. So this wasn't very politically correct for farmers. Farmers were very unhappy with the political powers that be at the time, and that was reflected in our farm, who we voted for later, who we had aligned ourselves to. So I started going to school in 1949. Now the problem I had there was myself and my younger brother Michael, who was a year younger than me. We started in school together, so basically I was kept back a year. He went to school when he was 4 and I went to school when I was 5. Yeah. But we both sat in the same seat, and we got on okay. The girl that was teaching us was very nice to kids, but we had a bit of a problem with the male teacher when we were into the master's room, and he was not very nice. So he walloped me one time for not being able to sing, and this was a common problem. And at one stage we were all taken out from school over the carry on of the teacher, and I don't know how long we stayed at home, but we weren't at school for a long period of time, and my father insisted that we'd go back to school when the teacher was changed. So the next thing we got was a local man from Dunbeg, Joe Whelan, replaced the teacher, and going to school became a paradise instead of a hill. Yeah. After that. Yeah. So I stayed there until 1957, and then Michael and myself wrote out, we had this priest come to school, and he was looking for young priests, so we filled out this piece of paper anyway. We both wanted to become priests. So about 1957, this priest arrived to our house one evening to pick up the two of us, potential priests. And my father said to him, he says, do you think that these youngsters are mature enough to make decisions about what they want to do? And the priest says, well, he says, they'll be educated, so if they change their mind, he says, they can leave. And he says, I can well afford to educate my own children. So the next thing he done was he hid for Ennis Chamber with my father and mother and Michael, and we went to the Christian Brothers in Ennis Chamber, and I remember a brother coming out, and my father said to him, we have two potential priests here. He says, see what you can do with them. So we went to school in the West Clare Railway. Started about 7:30 in the morning. Sometimes the cows have to be milked, and I went to school in that train for roughly 5 years, and two more of my brothers, Paul and Michael, went as well. And my mother used to always say, we had to pay the Christian Brothers that time, we had to pay for the train, and we had to pay for something to eat. So my mother used to say, it was a man's wages every week to send you to school. which it was.
Yeah.
And they sent us to school at a big cost to themselves. And I stayed there until 1961. I'd done the leave in 1961. I would be a very average pupil. Good at history, good at Irish, but my maths is very poor. So I left there and I joined the Air Corps in 1962 to train to be an aircraft technician. And my Irish was very good because we went to a total Irish school. I done Latin through Irish, science, chemistry. The only thing I done through English was prose and poetry and Shakespeare. And I could still rhyme off Shakespeare for you. So the first morning in class anyway, in the Air Corps, an aeronautical engineer, an engineering officer came in. He said, anyone here in the class knows Byl's Law? There was 40 of us in the class. And of course I put up my hand. De Leon Bhuili, Tasha Gum. My Irish came out. And I started off. And he says, young fella, will you please sit down? He says, I don't know what you're talking about. They don't know what you probably don't know yourself. And that's what I got from my Irish. In the story, we'll do a little bit afterwards. So that's what I got from my Irish.
But Joe, just to go back to the whole area of before you went to the Air Corps, even like the one thing that strikes me when I talk about the Whelan family,
Yeah.
and I know you well, and I know a lot of your family well, and we've a great relationship. There is something going through the family, an entrepreneurial DNA. And when you talk about your childhood, and you got huge opportunity in tough times in the country from your parents, you obviously had great parents,
Yeah.
and they had a great impact on you. And I can see that you still appreciate that now, after all these years. You can see that the effort they made, but their time in America, and the worldliness that they had, even I knew it was a quite mechanised farm for an era that there was no mechanisation. Did that inform the entrepreneurial DNA of maybe you and your brothers, and even to the success that you became as a family afterwards?
Well, I suppose our way of life and our farm reflects what my father and mother lived through in America. They did have not an academic education, but they had a technical education. They saw how things worked in America. They saw the changes. And when they came back to Ireland, my mother used to say, we came back to the Stone Age. There was no running water. There was no electricity. There was no toilets. The toilets were basically where the cows and cattle were. And my mother said mostly what she missed was a freezer because food was gone bad. And she was used to being in America. You put something into the freezer and it was there the following day. Yeah. So food was a big issue. Now, in our house, we were totally self-sufficient in food. My mother would have 50 geese. They lived in the river. We never had turkeys. We had ducks, hens, we had eggs, we had everything that was self-sufficient. And we caught salmon in the river legally or otherwise, it doesn't matter, but we got plenty of food. And I'd say my mother then, every year she'd write away to Power Seeds and Waterford. And she had her own little garden apart from our main tillage. And she would grow corn on the cob and she'd grow a lot of the bits and pieces that she saw in America. So we were probably brought up different than most families in the area because we had different influences working on us. So mechanization was a big thing in our house. And one of the reasons for that was the West Clare Railway split our farm in two. And that steam train passed our house every day 6 times. In the summer's evenings, the tourists going to Kilkee would be out the windows and they had cameras, and I remember we'd be saving hay and they rarely saw a tractor and 5 or 6 kids inside a field. And I'm sure there's a lot of photographs around that we'll never see about that particular period of time.
You're part of a lot of people's holiday memories
Yeah,
in far-flung
they
countries.
would have seen 5 or 6 kids inside in the field with a tractor and saving hay. And that was rare at that time,
Yeah.
back in the 50s, the very early 50s.
Totally different.
So there must be a lot of photographs because thousands of people went to Kilkee from Limerick and other places in that train.
Yeah.
So we would have seen all this mechanization. We would be trying to race the steam train with a tractor when we were kids. And the drivers in the steam train, the road was parallel to the train and maybe only 5 metres of a distance between. And all those train drivers knew us as kids. And we had a fantastic time growing up in a middle-sized farm. It wouldn't be a big farm, but we'd have a lot of bogland, and we didn't have a farm that you could grow wheat in, but we grew barley and oats. And
You were an industrious family all
during
along.
the tillage campaign, I remember you had to fill out your tillage every year, and I remember a guard coming from Dunbeg looking for the tillage, and we were all going to school one morning, and he went, this big guard appeared in the door and he says, "Mrs. Whelan, I'm here for the tillage." And my mother said she was at the door and she was giving us all a spoon of cod liver oil going out the door. That was common practice that time for kids. And he wouldn't have us out, so we were an hour late for school. And my father came home and he says, what? My mother was complaining how difficult this guard was. And he said, there's nothing wrong with him. He says that a bag of spuds wouldn't sort out, or a pole toe. So the following morning, my father was going through Dunbig, where they were crushing stones up in Dunmore, and he called into the barrack, and your man came out, and he didn't get the bag of spuds, he got the other thing.
He got the
And
stick
compulsory tillage started in 1943 in England, and it ended in 1945. But in Ireland, it didn't finish. It went on until about 1952. And so ended compulsory tillage. About a month after that incident, compulsory tillage ended in Ireland. That had no bearing in it.
We can't confirm whether there was anything.
Huh?
We can't confirm whether the Pole Toger had anything in
Yeah,
common
we
with
can't
that.
confirm that had any influence. It didn't have compulsory tillage, but there you are.
Joe, the whole area, you know, the upbringing you had, and in a maybe a tougher climate than we have, definitely a tougher climate than we have nowadays. The remarkable thing was the success that your family had overall, yourself included. Today, Whelan Farm Machinery, and many people would know, you're the main dealership for Massey Ferguson and Agco products. You're the main dealership for JCB. You're employing over 100 people, I believe, the Whelans are around Kilrush area alone. And you have a store in Galway, you've one in Ennis also, and you've a depot in Limerick. Like, it's a large employer, Whelan Farm Machinery is now. It's not just, it's a regional employer, really. Like, to get to that scale over the years and to be where you are now, do you think companies like yours are recognised enough? I know you're not looking for recognition, you're not that type of person, but we speak of the multinationals, the Apples, the Medtronic, different companies you have that are making a huge contribution to our economy. The likes of Whelans, they're regional, they're our companies, and they'll be here for a long time, hopefully. Do you think companies like yours are recognised enough, and maybe the regulation is a bit onerous upon companies like yourselves? Do you think that there's enough recognition for your businesses? Yeah,
well, that's debatable now. I'm going to start. When I came to Kilrush first in 1967, I left the Air Corps. I worked for a while for 20th Century Fox. They were making the film The Blue Max. And then I took on the agency for Zeta Tractors. And in 1968, myself and some friends of mine went to Czechoslovakia. Now, if you asked us where Czechoslovakia was that time, we probably couldn't show it to you on a map, but we went out there, and we had an interpreter, and we toured Czechoslovakia. We went to Brno where the Brin gun was made. We went to the Tetral Mountains. And as we travelled through the countryside, we saw lines of Russian tanks coming against us. We didn't realise the consequences, but we were actually there when the Russians invaded Czechoslovakia, and Dubček was dethroned, just like the Russians coming into Ukraine and planting their own man in charge until he was unplanted again. But we'll go back to the bit of industry. When I came to Kilrush first, there was 600 manufacturing jobs inside the core of the town. These have largely disappeared. We had great firms like the Glynn's employing probably 100 people. We had Blunny's Mill employing 100 people. We had the ceramics factory with well over 100 people. We had Charlie Glynn's seaweed factory with 30. We employed 30 ourselves down the West Clare Railway, running a planter company. That was before I got involved in the business. And you know, all the shops. So we used to make it up, there was 600 manufacturing jobs inside in this town. Now what have we? We have an awful lot of dependence.
Yeah.
And you have no obligation.
Yeah.
But you have demands. This is what I would disagree with. You say, right, we have been successful in the town. We have by serious hard work. All of my family, basically when I started business, to get my business going, I was very lucky. A friend of mine, PJ Murphy and Pat Murray, who were in Mechanization and Ferma. So they said to me that would I go around Clare and do night classes for Mechanization and Ferma on how diesel engines worked. So I used to travel around at night. I went to 6 Mile Bridge. I'd done a night class there. I'd done one in Cross in Carrigaholt. I'd done one here in the technical school. And I created an awful lot of business for myself. I'd done these at no cost to anybody but myself. But I'd take with me a crankshaft and a pistons and rings and an injector pump. And I'd show all these young farmers how a diesel engine, what the theory and practice of it. And I generated a lot of business, but I was doing 16 hours a day. So business doesn't start without a very high cost to yourself. I'm very lucky with all my family. I have 5 kids. 4 of them are in business in the town, and my daughter's a teacher down in Pallaskenry. And they all live in town now. So I have 10 grandchildren roughly that I can see every Sunday. You talk about what success is. That's what I see as success.
Mm-hmm. Your definition of success has changed as you go along.
Yeah.
You can value
you have to change with the times. Now, I'm hitting for 83, so when you're my age, that transition you're not capable of doing. It has to go to the next generation that's competent in modern technology. So I'm very lucky that my children have adopted in the modern technology to run a modern business. Yeah. And our business, we deal now directly with Massey Ferguson's factory. We deal directly with JCV's factory. So there are no stepping stones or rungs of a ladder in between. We're dealing with the manufacturers.
So you're directly importing the
machinery. We're direct importers. So we have gone from being an agrarian society to an industrial family, basically.
Yeah.
And all my other brothers are basically involved in industry as well.
Yeah.
So we have gone through that transitional period. And that transitional period is shown here in the museum from being basically an agrarian agricultural society as you go right through the place up to the point where the tractors are down the other building. It reflects that long period in time, the transition in farming from saving hay to cutting silage with single shop harvesters to round balers, and now to we'll say the modern system, precision shop harvest and everything else. So there's been a lot of different steps and changes in agriculture. Most farmers, especially older farmers, unfortunately can't change with the times. So you do need generation in farming. You do need young people coming into farming. But to encourage that, you're not going to bring in beef from Brazil. It's not going to encourage that. You need what we have and our existing green grass needs to be exploited, and we need to upgrade our systems, especially in government, to appreciate that rural Ireland needs to survive. We don't want people coming from inside the pale every year with their sandals coming down to see what people in rural Ireland looks like when it's gone.
And that's the problem. There's
That's
a certain amount of arrogance.
They'll come to see us once a year to see what we look like.
Well, the problem is, Joe, there's a certain amount of arrogance in official Ireland, whereby, and I know it from speaking to people in official Ireland, whereby they think, well, if some of our policy on climate and regulation, if it's wrong in a few years, sure, we can all of us roll it back. The problem is, and you understand it, if anyone takes a tour around this beautiful museum with us, there is a culture of agriculture. And no more than your family, the culture of mechanization, the culture of industrialization. There's a culture there. And if you lose a step or a generation, you won't get that back. And I'm sure doing this museum, that brings it to life to you. Like, you had to have a reason to want to do this rural life museum.
Yeah, well, the reason I done it actually, that where Tesco is now, we had a crazy golf course there, and my kids and myself and my wife, we went to out to Disneyland back 30 years ago. So we saw a crazy golf course there, and when we came back, we said we could build one of those. So we had 30 acres in the verge of the town. So we decided we'd build it on a system of historic monuments, each reflecting 18 or 19 historic monuments, reflecting the difference in Ireland going back to Brian Boru or the monastic system and up to... so we had the Gollars in England, we had Reginald's Tower in Waterford, we had the Rocket Castle, we had Mararu's Castle, all in miniature stone built. And when the children were going to school then playing golf, there was a birthplace in each of them, and to tell you the history of who lived in this. So the kids were learning their history when they went through that. So when Kevin went to university, he'd done a thesis on how to teach history, and he got second place for his achievement.
Yeah.
So Kevin is not one of the lads now running the garage.
That's right, yeah.
So history runs through our family.
Yeah, it's a strong passion of yours.
Yeah.
You mentioned Kevin there, and you mentioned some of the rest, Joe, obviously. The challenges, like, I see when I look at your business as an outsider and as a farmer who buys equipment off you, some of the challenges of any modern business now is succession, and it's family, and it's, especially in the farming world, it's usually a family business, and yours is very much a family business. Did you find that challenging? You know, you've two sons involved with the machinery side of things. Was it challenging to give the bit of reins to the lads and be able to say, look, give them the responsibility? Yeah,
well, the transition in our business happened in the downturn, and the business was transferred from myself basically to Kevin and Joseph, and they were competent more into modern technology. My administration at that stage would be getting stale, and it was an ideal time for me to get out. I was probably 70 or thereabout. So, but I still felt like there was more miles on my clock. So I said we had sold the land to Tesco, so that was the pitch and put course gone.
Yeah.
So I said we'd substitute that with the museum. So it's all progression and it's all change. And I'm very lucky like that my kids have progressed and established a place in Loughrea and Ennis and now in Grana. And we basically cover the west of Ireland now for farm mechanization.
Yeah.
And I'm one of the lucky ones. I could be down there struggling trying to deal with modern technology which I would have lost contact with. I am here from my older way of living suits me here now. I meet people every day, and I live the life of what I lived when I was a child, which is, I've done everything I ever wanted to do in life, and I'm happy to sit down here and talk to people every day about what life is like.
Yeah, well, you're a fantastic resource of knowledge, but just having a chat with you about the different artifacts around the museum, so many things I wasn't even aware of, and having relatives in this part of the country. You as an entrepreneur, and I know you're not into any of these silly terms like entrepreneurs and all that sort of stuff, but you are an entrepreneur.
Oh, well,
You are. You at this stage, as much as anybody.
I would never have considered myself to be anything else but a hard worker.
Yeah.
You put the hours in, you get what you put into any business.
Okay.
You get out what you put in. You don't get anything else out.
Yeah. Did you?
And my youngsters now, Kevin and Joe as well, not youngsters anymore, they're all mature middle-aged men. They're all doing 16 hours a day.
Yeah.
You won't survive unless you put in the hours in. We're not public servants that work the minimum hours. We work the maximum hours.
Yeah.
And you don't get paid for the hours you work.
But on that point, and the point of the responsibility of if you are going to do something for yourself or in a career, do you think as a society, and like we are talking about history, like where we're filming is giving us the theme for our podcast nearly, as a society in terms of success and in terms of even the national success of our economy, are we gone too far towards a rights-based society rather than a responsibility-based society, where you understood when you were younger you had a responsibility to survive and to thrive, and that was all about working hard and constantly pushing the envelope a bit further every year? Whereas now, do people feel that you should have an easier quality of life? Maybe I should be able to have a kind of a 9-to-5 lifestyle and still be able to be successful. Are we turning into kind of a weak society in that way?
Yeah, I suppose we're gone weaker from the point of view that we came from a point that we self-sufficiency and hard work was drilled into us since we were kids, and this stays with you for life. This just doesn't go away. Like, it's like cycling a bike. You learn the cycle once, you don't forget it.
Yeah.
And what's instilled into you as a child will be there for life. Basically, I'm still doing 8 or 9 hours work a day. I'm quite happy to be able to work.
Yeah.
I suppose I'll work until my expiry date comes up. Simple as that.
Yeah. You're of that.
I do see the change in government now. We're not the conservative people we were back in the 50s and 60s. We've gone very left in our administration. We're not centrist anymore. We've gone very left. I don't know. Something's got to change, because we're not the conservative country we were back in the 40s, 50s and 60s. And it's basically the generation that went before me and our generation that built this country. I don't think the authorities are aware of who built this country up to the level that they think it's foreign factories and everything else. These people can move
100%.
and change whenever they please, and we'll still be back to agriculture. When we got the big downturn in this country, to the small hardware shops and the small shops in every town and village that closed down, the politicians went away with their big fat pensions, the bankers went away with their big fat pensions, but who paid for it? The small businesses in this country paid for it. The builders were just forced out of business, and then they want to know why we have no housing. We have no housing because the people who are capable of building houses were just forced out of business.
Wow. But I think, Joe, you stepped on something very valid there. When you listen to the radio or anything and they speak about the contribution, let's say agriculture, and like your industry basically is an offshoot of agriculture. It's based on providing equipment to farmers. But when there's a conversation about rural Ireland and, we've moved as a society, you've rightly said we're not as conservative as we were, but there's a very intellectually dishonest exercise being carried out by economists where they say, well, agriculture is only worth such a percentage of our economy. They base it on farm gate price for milk, beef and lamb. They don't base it on the actual value add afterwards in the food, that they're mainly, we're selling a basket of high value beef, high value lamb, high value dairy, cheese and butter products. Kerrygold is our first $1 billion food brand. They base it on the farm gate. They have a very surface level analysis of what's happening. And the fact that ally that then with movement to more left wing, I won't say liberal because it's not liberal, because what's happening now is we're over regulated. When you move in that direction, the Conservative always walked up to a fence and they always said, well, why is that fence there? The left, what they do is they get rid of the fence and they say, we'll solve that afterwards. And like when you ally those things together, there will be big question marks, maybe not in the medium term, but in the future, if any of those multinationals leave our country and we'll say, well, where are our SMEs? Where are our farms? Where are our businesses like your own, which are on the larger end of it, but still, it's valid. Our society has changed a lot. But I suppose, back to you as a businessman and entrepreneur, anybody that knows you knows you're a straight talker. And it's quite refreshing nowadays because you don't maybe meet people who say what they're thinking. They say what might seem appropriate at the moment. Is being a straight talker in business, is it always an advantage? Or can it be a disadvantage? Like, does it ever get you?
You're right there. Look at, we're in business because straight talking is straight talking and honesty is honesty. You will not be in business unless you're honest. My sons are now dealing with a third generation of young farmers. I used to see 20 years ago a farmer come in with his son, and I'd recognise the face, I'd recognise the facial features. I could tell who that son was without asking who he was. And now my sons are dealing with a third generation. That's what I call success. When you're dealing with a third generation of people that they have been loyal to you and you've been loyal to them, that's very important. Now we have a situation, we have lost our beet industry. When I was young, from a place like Clare, we sent beet to the Tune factory. In October, when milk wasn't, cows wasn't being milked, we got checks back from the Tune factory for our beet. We got bags of beet pulp, which we could carry from the railway station as kids, to so light. That was fed to the pigs, and gruel was made from it, and bonners were produced from it. We have lost our sugar industry to foreign countries. We have lost our beet industry. Are we now going to lose our cattle industry? With Genius has gone out to Brazil talking about what we're going to do. What we represent outside in Brazil is like going to Kilkee and picking up a grain of sand. That's what we represent. But our authorities seem to think that they're world players. They're not playing with the full deck.
No. Trying to be best boy in class the whole time.
Pardon?
I think the problem with some of the problems with Ireland and maybe our place in the EU, we seem to want to feel that we're the bleeding edge, the cutting edge of Europe, but what we really are is the bleeding edge. We're putting ourselves in positions where we're inconsequential when you talk about emissions globally. Totally inconsequential.
We're talking about carbon footprint and carbon this, carbon the other thing. When I was a child, I put out cows in the morning. We had rabbits and hares running under the cows' legs. We went to the bog, we saw grouse, we saw pheasants. We saw wildlife everywhere. Now those same fields are full of trees. And we have the crown quit, the pine marten as we call him in Irish, the crown quit. He's out there and he has killed everything. You go into any of these woodlands and you see nothing but wings of birds. Nobody realises the damage that's been done to rural Ireland. Only people like me that have went through it. We see damage been done, and they're saying we are so good for rural Ireland, we have destroyed rural Ireland. Rural Ireland was full of wildlife. Now there's no wildlife left. We have people talking about the foxes and the others, and an extreme end of the wedge about fox hunting and hare hunting. The people that collect the hares every year, they inject the hares and they make sure the hares are healthy when they're released out again. Those are the people that's contributing to rural Ireland.
They're the custodians.
Not the people above in Fox Rock or in the Pale that think they're the people that's contributing to rural Ireland. They come to see us once a year to see what we look like.
Yeah.
And then they go back with their sandals.
I totally agree with you, and I feel even if you look at the GA in West Clare and the whole depopulation of the area, and it's going back to your point about all the great businesses that were around Kilrush when you were younger, you would just wonder, does official Ireland want the likes of West Clare to be a conifer forest and a seaside, and very little beyond that? Is there nearly an acceptance of that?
Yeah, well, I think that one of the reasons we have wind machines turning all over our townlands. The British lived here controlled us for 800 years. We could fish the rivers, we could cut turf, we could do everything. They didn't destroy our rural life. Now we've been destroyed by Dublin. They say it is Europe. I don't think so. A lot of this stuff is not coming from Europe, it's coming from Dublin.
Well, we have vetoes. You have a veto.
We need now to stand up for ourselves. Other than that, we will have the Pale, but we won't have anything else.
Yeah. A rural wasteland.
If you go back to the 60s, we had a nuclear plant proposed for down Wexford and if that had gone ahead at the time, we would have sufficient electricity. Now, nuclear plants are as safe as just anything else at the moment. I don't know, we will never be able to generate enough electricity from the systems we have. And some people think that all these geniuses can do this. We just will have to put in a nuclear plant eventually.
But through the LNG plant that was meant to have been going on the River Shannon before the formation talks with the Green Party for government, that was shelved. And if anything happens to interconnect, we're in trouble.
Sure. The influences of one man in this country were just something unbelievable. And of course, he's retired with his big fat pension, just like the bankers and the politicians.
Yeah.
But they have left a mark in this country. It's going to take a long time to eradicate it.
That can't be unravelled as easy as people think.
We are what we are. We're a food-producing nation. It's the only thing we're probably recognised for worldwide food and tourism. Anything else can move in and move out.
It's mobile.
Food and tourism cannot move in or move out. And we're not, if we try to replace it, we'll be very sorry.
We will. We'll be poor country. The whole area, you've seen the progress in Ireland between going to the EU and everything, and what it has done for rural Ireland. Are farmers today and is the agricultural industry, is it better off, in your opinion, because you've been dealing with them, as you said, through 3 generations? Do you feel farming's in a good place? And
it is debatable because, you see, in my time, not so many farmers' sons were educated. Yeah, some of them became doctors and became lawyers and became dentists and they generally found the higher up in the society, farmers, and because they came from farming, they worked hard. Most people today will tell you, any of these multinationals will tell you, their preference is to find a farmer's son because he's a work ethic. That work ethic comes from rural Ireland. Working long hours, people have experience working on farmers. Farmers, of course, today the young fellas find the attraction of a weekly wage or a monthly wage better than slaving the farm or working hard. But mechanization now has changed a lot of that. And you have very progressive farmers. Even in County Clare, you probably go to Cork and Waterford and Tipperary to see the bigger and better producing farmers. But the reason that farming in West Clare is as it is today, we have some great farmers from here to Kilbeha, some of the best farmers in the country. And most of the reason for that is that back in the 60s and 70s, when jobs were in Shannon, it was too far to travel. So what happened in West Clare, some fella expired and the neighbour bought his farm, he continued to buy it, and then he expanded. And now we've some very proficient farms in West Clare, especially in the peninsula. And that's the reason. The work wasn't there for them to go to factories and everything else. So they stayed at home and minded what they have. And now they are the very progressive farmers. Whereas you go down to your own area around Shannon, a lot of farmers went into Shannon working, but the farms paid for it.
Yeah.
They didn't.
They had other options.
They hadn't.
Yeah.
The option wasn't in West Clare.
But you can see that because somebody told me later that most of the dairy cows in County Clare are west of Ennis, and our area, the parish in the Market and Fergus, is probably the best parish for land in the Diocese of Killaloe. There's very little dairying, only pockets of it.
Yeah.
Because as you said, the alternatives were there to have a job down the road, and people, if they wanted to stay in the land back here, they had to be innovative.
The farming became a hobby.
Yeah.
And here the farming became the main operation. And if you got a job working part-time in town, the creamery or whatever, Lidmore Dairies, whatever it had, that was the part-time job. The farming was still the main job. Take Lidmore Dairies, 130 people worked in Lidmore Dairies one time. We were probably, in Killush, the Glynn family made great contributions to the town. We were probably the third or fourth biggest producer of ice cream in Ireland. And that's gone.
Gone completely.
And yet, ice cream has been used every day.
Yeah.
And yet, why don't we have an ice cream factory where we always have an ice cream factory? All these questions are asked. We are in a rural area. But our politicians seem to be very scarce on the ground when there's anything going on. You'll see them when there's votes, but after that you don't see them any longer. Yeah. And I watch some debates on television now. Most of our politicians are more like Abbey actors and actresses that are going with their hands and heads and everything else.
Media trained.
And then you watch a debate in DEC and a person can stand up there and make a statement without really, he's not an actor.
Yeah.
He's making a statement. We seem to have actors in Irish, in RT now, and all the politicians seem to be TikTok actors, that's what they are.
But what I always find interesting with you're talking about our dirt politicians, like there was a whole move there in the past 10 years for this diversity, equity and inclusion and gender quotas and all. But the question I couldn't understand was there was never a question about the diversity of the backgrounds of the people that were going into politics. Like you might change the gender of a person, it might be a woman instead of a man, fair enough. But, you know, their life experience can be very similar to another male. You're probably not drawn enough from people like yourself.
That's a very interesting conversation because if you look at that High Court case we have at the moment now about this baby, who the baby is or what it is or everything else or what entitlements are, we're going down a funny road that we're not coming back from. When all this thing came in originally, it was the tin into the wedge. But the legal costs and all the other costs will be paid by you, the taxpayer. This is a problem.
There's a real cost to all that.
And the consequence of all this, okay, anyone can be whatever they like, keep it to yourself, mind your own business, but don't try to impose your will on anybody else.
No. Well, that's what I'm saying with the left. They're not liberal. Liberal is something different to what's happening with the modern day left. It's very much an imposition.
Imposition. Yeah. You said exactly what the word is. Imposition.
Yeah. You must believe.
Yeah.
They wanted to get rid of religion out of society, but you know, leftism is nearly like a religion in itself. It's doctrinal, like.
Yeah. But as I said when we started, we did have a conservative society, I suppose. Now we're not a centrist government anymore. We're a lefty government. All our main parties
They're all
But
they're all
we,
different, yeah.
we all, I would always be a conservative voter. And while I wouldn't be a member of any political party, but I would vote for what I thought was the best person to be put in power.
Yeah.
We lack that type of person being elected now, because we're voting for who is popular in the area.
Yeah.
We're voting for people that are popular. In my view, the fancy den or the Dalteen is what you're getting.
Yeah.
And you can look at that whichever way you like.
Yeah.
That's not what you want.
No.
You want someone that has conviction. I mean, Pascal O'Donoghue is now leaving. He has the budget is out. He obviously had that job got before. He obviously had that job got before the budget came out.
Yeah.
So he can impose his will, and then he's gone.
Yeah.
He's gone to better.
Yeah.
He's flown into better hunting grounds.
He is better pastures. But back to the business side of things. One of your grandchildren, your granddaughter, grandson, comes to you and says, "Grandad, I want to go into business." Would you advise it to the next generation? Because a lot of our listeners are young people who are really interested in enterprise, and I think your take on it would be interesting.
Well, that's funny because two of my granddaughters at the moment are in university in Liverpool, studying chemistry or whatever, and they intend, no doubt, on going into business in time. So we have the next generation started off. They are in their late teens, and they're getting on very well. They're both passed all their exams, so we have another generation that's going to be hopefully self-employed.
Brilliant. Because we need those people to carry the baton. We need that next generation in business.
Oh, you do. You need people that can basically think for themselves. We're not all like the piper that leads the rats over the into the river. That's what we've become.
Yeah. But social media has a lot got to do with that.
Yeah,
too,
look,
internet.
I'm one of the lucky ones. I don't get involved.
You don't have a TikTok or anything like that, Joe.
I don't want to know anything about it. I'm just I think myself maybe what you call a practical person. Common sense, of course, common sense isn't common anymore among people. Common sense, we are common people, I suppose. We think from a practical point of view.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be influenced by any new ideas or anything else. People like my family, they push themselves in a direction they're happy with.
In your life, like in business and in life in general, do you think instinct is nearly more important than like having grand ideas and grand strategies? You seem to be someone who, like, you were on holidays in Disneyland and you saw the crazy golf and you said, we can do that in Kilrush. Would you operate on instinct?
I think that it pays people to travel. I suppose because my father and mother travelled, they picked up new ideas. I remember when I was a young lad coming into fairs in Kilrush and we walk on cattle. We would, 8 or 9 years, we walk cattle 10 miles to fairs. I know what it's like. You come into town, the only thing you could get into town was a pint of porter. And all the townspeople kicking up a record about the cows doing their thing up in the windows, and the lady coming out and following you with a stick. And what I remember about the fairs was, as you come into the town of Kilrush anyway, you had these very prosperous looking gentlemen, and they'd have big brown boots on, and they'd look at the cattle and price them. Next thing, the old jobber would come up to you and he'd put a price on the cattle, and he was pricing the cattle for his boss that he was sending him to put a lower price on the cattle. But it's all very interesting. I thought like that, you know, you wanted a sandwich or something, couldn't get anything in the town. So I think when people went abroad, they came back with new ideas. Just they put up a little bit of a restaurant, they could give you tea or a sandwich or something else.
And
These are all the little
house.
things that made the difference.
Yeah.
Our towns, the leadership in most of our towns would have come from people that travelled abroad and came back.
We were downstream from other countries, I suppose.
Definitely from America, we are still downstream. Maybe present thing it doesn't reflect that maybe as much, but there's no doubt about what happens in America happens here some years later.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what that is, it will happen.
Yeah. I feel
Europe has gone. Europe has gone a little bit left. I wouldn't be happy with the European line of thinking just now because that too has gone so green. I mean, everything's green, 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 green. We've gone too far with this green thing. And I mean, there's no use going out to the Chinese or the Russians or the Americans and telling them that our green agenda, these are the big ones. We're just the grains of sand in Kilkee.
Well, there seems to be also some of the more radical proponents of the green agenda, they seem to have an anti-capitalism feel to them, whereas it's under the veil of the green agenda they're trying to carry out.
Well, look, the Greens and the Socialists have joined up basically. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, I agree with
The
you.
Greens and the Socialists have now become the one. The Greens have realised that to jump on the bandwagon, they're going to jump with the Socialists. They're not going to jump with the Conservatives.
No.
So you can see that happening in Europe at the moment. If you look at the Nordic countries, Sweden, Denmark and these people, Lithuania, Poland, we should be thinking more like those and thinking more like,
Yeah.
you know,
Practical.
these are the countries that have proved they can survive under oppression and everything else. Ireland has been lucky from the point of view that we haven't an invasion or anything else. We hadn't the First World War, we hadn't the Second World War. We should be much more progressive than we are now.
But are we got back to the whole thing about the EU and America? There's an alarming anti-American element in Ireland, and we are basically a 51st state. We're Connecticut, but we work with bad weather.
I like that one. All you need to do is the territories act going through at the moment and to think about, you know, how we're going to penalise the Jews and these people. The Jews have so much power worldwide with America and right here to all our industries in Dublin that the little lefties think they're going to sort it out, but they're doing a lot of damage. And the damage, I don't think they can see what they're capable of doing.
They don't understand. They don't understand, and in many cases, they're not exposed themselves currently, so they don't care.
We have ministers that I wouldn't employ. That's telling you nothing but the truth.
Yeah.
If I was to give a job to someone, I wouldn't give them a job. I wouldn't give a lot of politicians jobs.
Yeah. Their value in the real world isn't...
Because they make no contribution to your business.
Yeah.
They're not making any contribution to the state.
Yeah.
You watch most debates, which I'd watch EEC debates, I'd watch Shannon debates, I'd watch a lot of these debates at night. The level of debate is very, very poor.
Well, it seems to be...
And it's all leaning in one direction, lefty, green. And I can't figure out why we have gone down that road. We're basically a conservative country.
Yeah. Well,
The church has lost its power. Maybe the church carried it too far. But we forget that the church has done a lot of good.
There was a lot of people educated that wouldn't have been educated and got healthcare. They got healthcare. They wouldn't have got it otherwise.
Yeah, I went to the Christian Brothers for 5 years. I must say I enjoyed every bit of it. Never had any issues.
Yeah.
And you talk to a lot of people, they had issues, but they probably had issues with themselves as well, like. It's not just...
Yeah. Can't pin it all on one person.
Yeah. A lot of people have personal issues.
Yeah.
They blame somebody else for it.
Oh, yeah.
My personal issues are work. So my mind is fully taxed, my body is fully taxed.
And you're so tired of leaving, you only time to go to bed.
I don't have time for thinking what is survival.
You're doing better than surviving now. Your proudest achievements. I know it's a very vague sort of thing to talk about with someone, but I feel when you're talking about your grandkids now and the quality of life that they're living around, and that the next generation of Whelans are already interested in working in business and that. What are your proudest achievements overall in life?
If you look behind you, you see that photograph? My proudest achievement was to have now 10 grandchildren in the bog foot and tough with me.
Yeah.
For my Father's Day last year.
Brilliant.
That was one of the proudest days of my life.
Yeah.
The other things I'm proud of, that all my family are living in Kilrush, and they're all in business in Kilrush. And while my daughter is teaching in Pallaskenry, she's a holiday home in Kilrush, and she's sending her children to school in Kilrush at the moment. And the other thing is, all my children and grandchildren are healthy. And basically, when I was younger, my proudest achievement was when I was in the Air Corps, probably 40 people in my class, and I got #1 place in my class when I graduated. That was a proud achievement.
Great achievement.
And there are no place for #2s.
No.
That's what it is.
First or last.
That's it.
Coming up, I know your parents were definitely role models to you, but did you even have the concept when you were a young lad? Was there somebody that you looked up to for that bit of inspiration? Or even today, it doesn't have to be years ago. I think we all have people we admire in life. And like, I'd have to say, I admire what you've achieved and what you've done for our county and our area. And I don't think that's sometimes appreciated enough. There's actually a lot of public good done in private enterprise. And sometimes they're not appreciated enough. So from our point of view, I'd admire what you've achieved. But did you have a role model, or do you have a role model? Someone that you look up to and say, yeah, that's somebody I could see a lot of either myself in, or I could see a lot of traits that I'd like to have.
You could make that a little bit shorter, but it was a little bit long for...
I suppose, do you have a role model? Did you have someone that you looked up to, really? In terms of business and in terms of life when you were growing up?
I probably would have looked up... My father and my mother were two great role models, but then you had a man like Charlie Glynn in Kilrush, who had the seaweed factory. He was a great role model when I came to Kilrush. And when I got the Zetter Tractor Agency, he was the first man that came to me and congratulated. Now, he was a big businessman in the town, which... Would I do the same thing today to some young fella starting in business? This is what I often think about it.
Yeah.
And these were well-established business people in the town. They were there for a couple of hundred years. And for him to come to me and say that was a great achievement for me.
And for it to happen at such an important time, it was quite great encouragement.
Yeah, you're there and you're kind of in a seesaw struggling to get a business going, and someone like that comes, that's a lift.
It is.
That's important.
And at a time when you need that bit of encouragement.
Everyone, look at anybody starting business today, for a good number of years, it's very, very difficult. And I remember driving tractors in the middle of winter. I'd hit for Ballyvaughan in a winter's evening with a new tractor, and I'd be trading in a 35 or something, and I'd drive it from there with no cab in the middle of winter. And I'll tell you one thing, I often arrived here in Kilrush 3 hours later and fell off the tractor. I was so frozen to death. These are the things that gets you there. Mm-hmm. that you must do and you must stay at it. It's not easy.
But equally, almost there's a toughness in that. Well, like, you know, I won't say I'm at the very start of my career in business and farming or whatever, but if you were to advise me, not one bit of advice, but just a trait or something that stood to you in your life, what was the trait that stood to you that brought you to where you are?
Resilience. Stay at what you're doing. You will get tough times, you will get good times, you'll get bad times, but you mustn't give up. You must stay at it. You just set your targets and say, I'm going to get there.
A bit of doggedness, nearly.
Pardon?
A bit of doggedness.
Yeah, I suppose you could call it being thick if you like. You can call it whatever you like, but you just have to set your target to get there. I'm lucky that I had people to take over. Because if you don't have anybody to take over and you're breaking your neck in business, there's much point unless you have another generation coming behind you. Now, I see the next generation coming along with an interest. And that's fantastic.
There's a continuity there.
Pardon?
There's a continuity there.
That's what you call it, continuity.
Yeah.
And maybe not taking the same line of business, but to be awake enough to think there's other lines of business.
Yeah.
There are other lines, and be observant enough to know that there are other lines that you can do. We all can't do the one business.
Yeah. Don't be too fixed.
And business is changing. There's constant change everywhere. If you look at this AI thing now, and maybe it's a bubble, maybe it is not. But the ways of doing business are constantly changing. And if you can change with it, you've had it. Like farming, you have automatic milking machines coming in now, brought in by that Lely company some years ago. And now the cows can be milked, a farmer can have more spare time. The cows are being constantly milked. Things are changing. Very soon you'll have automatic tractors going out and spreading the fertilizer and cutting the silage, and it will take the hand labour. When we look back at farming in the 40s and 50s, and a farmer went out and ploughed his field and tilled it, we'll say he ploughed and tilled an acre and cut his crops and everything else. He travelled about 27 miles with 2 big boots in him. And every farmer was as thin as a lad for one reason. He could eat big lumps of bacon and cabbage, but he dissipated that into the ground every day because the weight of his boots was not what he carried. The mud stuck to the weight of those boots again. So most farmers, I remember when I was a child, there was no fat farmers.
Yeah.
There was thin as lads.
Yeah.
For one reason. They dissipated the food, ploughing fields and tillage and everything else.
Doing everything
So
there,
that's all changed.
Yeah.
Now we'll have big, well-fed farmers coming up with automation.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they're all going to the gym now. See, the latest thing, I'm going to the gym and you're going to the gym. I wouldn't know what a gym was.
Well, you were busy enough without it.
Pardon?
You were busy enough without it. You had enough activity.
I have enough activity in my life to keep 2 people going.
But Joe, look at, I've got an awful lot of great insights off you and great information, and I just found it very fascinating the way you charted not only our country's agrarian history, but the history of your story in a parallel line with it. But thanks very much for having us, and thanks for welcoming us to your lovely museum. And anybody that's in Kilrush should come and visit you here at the Museum of Rural Life, isn't it right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
As I said to you, every single person has their own stories to tell. We don't hear half the stories. But I come in here and I get Americans in here with farmers and I get some great stories.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you one very good story. And this happened. We were 4 tractor dealers one time and we got a free trip out to Pennsylvania where New Holland was after taking over Ford, the Ford tractor division basically without a business. We were Ford dealers. So I had a free trip, got out to Pennsylvania to the New Holland factory. So it was where the Amish people were. And the food was so good, we stayed around there for a week. We travelled all over the place. And it was fantastic to watch these farmers with their horses and caps, and they're cutting the hay with an engine up in the pull with 2 horses with an engine driving it. So it was semi-false. But anyway, some years later, the name of the name of the place where the New Holland factory was Intercourse. And some years later, I had a group of Amish people here. They were going to Wales and they were dressed up in all their paraphernalia, and they were into the museum. We were talking away about half an hour, and I said, I had a great time. And I said, I bet I know where you're from. Where? He says, you're from Intercourse. Oh, that's the name of the village. Haven't we all? He says. and a lady from America was in here recently, and we were talking about it, and she wrote down the book, and Joe, I'm not from Intercourse.
Immaculate conception.
Yeah, there we are.
Joe, thanks a million.
Come on,
I really appreciate it.
I enjoyed talking to you.
Thanks, Joe.